Hello, and thank you for joining me today. You can see I skipped over that middle nose. I'm actually not uploading that video, and that's because it just didn't go that well. I was having a hard time with the skin, and there wasn't a lot to really take away from that one. So we're going to go ahead and jump right to the end here with this third nose going the other direction. This is another side profile nose, which with it being a 3D shape, yeah, it's kind of the easiest way to do it. I think that front view is one of the hardest ways. It's very easy to make that nose look flat, and with it being a 3D shape on the face, that's not what you want. I do find another issue if you're having problems with your noses is getting that proportion right, and so it really does help to paint in the surrounding skin, maybe some of the eyebrows or the eyes, what have you. If you're really struggling with that, it doesn't hurt to take a step back and sketch out your proportions with the whole face, which is what I started doing. I was practicing rather than just practicing the individual parts. I highly recommend sketching out a whole face, just very simply. You don't have to go really realistic, just to get your proportions. Practice those proportions over and over again. Don't forget that each step really is its own tool, and you have to take the time to learn how to use each of those tools in your toolbox, and then you have to get them out, sharpen them, dust them off, clean them up, all of those types of things. So don't be afraid, even if you're focusing on something and really trying to, get better. Jump around at least a little bit. Have different ways to exercise your brain so you don't get stale. What I've done here is, as with all the other ones, we laid in our proportions with the graphite. That's just a regular pencil. If you feel like you put too much down, you can always take a kneaded eraser to lift some of that up. I did a wash of very neutral gray so that I'm able to come in here now with the white and put in all of these highlights. I'm trying to differentiate the darkest and lightest areas of my piece so that I can really gauge my midtones from there. And as far as I can tell, this seems to be a pretty good way to handle getting your values correct. I've been watching other artists, playing around myself, and this so far is my favorite way to approach a piece, is to go ahead and, after I have the idea of the shapes and the proportions I want, to go ahead and really lay in some of those dark areas and light areas, and then it really does make gauging everything else a lot easier. And for today's video, I'm going to talk to you guys here and there, but I'm going to go ahead and keep the in-between quiet. That way, if you want to put on your own music, I know we all have different tastes, feel free to do so. And I'm going to chime in here every once in a while with a different tidbit for you. Same thing, using my finger to smudge, and you can see that I got some paint over to the side. As always, don't fret too much about the mistakes. I just used that to give me a little more contrast with the nose. I debated whether or not I wanted to paint in a background, and then I realized there was really no skin on that side of the picture, and I didn't want to cheat, I guess, in my head by just painting in a background to define those shapes. So just plugging away. You'll notice I'm putting a lot of paint on the canvas. I have a lot of paint loaded up in my brush, and then I'm using my finger to move it around. As always, if you don't want to use your finger, you can always use another brush. You could use a Q-tip. I've seen some people use. No, don't use a Q-tip with your acrylic paint. Do that if you're sketching. It works really great with graphite. Really, you could just use another brush to soften it out. I just find maybe a sponge. A sponge might soak up some of your paint. The finger's just a good tool, guys. I like to get in there and feel the paint. And we're just taking this little bit by little bit, going through and adding in some more darks. You can see I'm really trying hard to define those creases, and that really is where some of the shadows are, and there's a lot of differentiation between the side of the nose and the top of the nose. So it goes back to just a lot of layering. Don't be afraid to put that paint on the canvas. You can always paint over it. That's the brilliant forgiveness of acrylics, is it may not look as good if you really have to cover a dark area, but you can paint over mistakes. So no sweat in the small stuff. I struggled a lot with this shadow on the corner of the nose. As you can see, I'm going in there with a lot of paint, a lot of layers, and that's because when we're breaking something down and we look at those shadows, sometimes they really do look like a line, and that's how your mind wants to draw it. But if you draw it that way on the paper, it just doesn't come across the same way. So that's something I'm still working on, and there's no shame in that at all. Just keep working on your weak areas and playing around with it until you get it right, because that's the only way that you're going to get better at it. You know how you stay exactly the same? You just do nothing and pretend that, yeah, you could do that if you really tried, but nah, okay, I'm just not going to think about it or do it. Or the opposite. You may think, yeah, well, I couldn't do it anyway. Oh my goodness, no. You need to try. Go ahead and give it a shot. The worst is that, oh no, well, you couldn't do it yet. If you really have a passion for something and you really pursue it, then you can do it. You just got to keep hacking away at the same thing. All right, these final little touches, and we're getting ready to wrap this up and call it good for the day. That means, oh goodness, we've got lips coming up next, and those are also tricky. They're kind of a mix, I think, between eyes and noses, whereas noses are a lot of shading, but then eyes have a lot of those hard lines. Lips are kind of in between, I think. They have a lot of shading, but because they're a very definitive shape on the face, then you really want to outline them. And we're not going to do that, just like we did it with the noses. Here's how far we have come so far. If you've been following along, this is a lot to have accomplished. And eventually we're going to put it all together and it's going to look awesome. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.